And this is a weekly conversation that we do live, unscripted, and we build it around a topic about exploration. I'm really glad that you're here because we're going to be, one of the central tenets of what we do is the idea of allowing people the opportunity to inquire about things and to give people the freedom to not only inquire about those things, but to actually explore and experiment with them. And this morning, we are looking forward to experimenting with you um, and inviting you into a process where we are going to actually be living the question of the week. So this week's inquiry is built around, if I let go, am I giving up? And, I was in a meeting this past week with a gentleman who said, I'd be willing to let go of anything as long as I could control the outcome. And that's the dilemma that we find ourselves in. But wonderfully about this conversation that we do every week, which we invite you to be a part of, is that we are also experimenting with moving from our traditional space into a new space in a new platform. And as the weeks emerge, we're letting go of where we've been, and we're going to be giving up where we've been to kind of move into our new space. So joining me this week in our new space are my roundtable participants, Sang and Ray. Good morning, folks.
Good morning.
How's it going?
I think it's going well.
Digs. I love the new digs.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about this room before we move on?
It's very cozy. I love, first of all, I love the bonsai tree. And just all the little intricacies. It's very serene and calming. So I like it.
Well, we like serene and calming.
Yes, you've invited us for tea on cushions, on comfy cushions.
Well, I'm going to ask those of you who may be watching the broadcast on YouTube live right now, if you can make sure that you can hear us, just let us know that it's broadcasting okay through to YouTube, if you can hear us. If you can't hear us on YouTube, put one of those really panicky things in there and we'll figure out a way to make it work. So anyway, good morning. And like I said, our conversation this week is built around a question. And this week's question is, if I let go, am I giving up?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I let go of this week was informing my fellow roundtable participants what this particular conversation would be this week. So one of the things that I always look forward to in these conversations, Saying, is you helping us get centered on something. So you've had probably exactly 90 seconds to look at this concept.
Right.
What's emerging for you?
The first thing I can think of is when you ask yourself, am I giving up? Do you feel like you're giving up?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the question for me, I know I would ask myself is it because this no longer serves me, or why am I choosing to use the particular phrase giving up? Right. And where does that come from? And does the phrase giving up mean that I've failed, or do I contribute it as a failure, or what does giving up mean to me?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Some people look at it like, you give up, you're a failure. If you give up, you don't want it bad enough. Like, there's all this judgment and stuff that comes around it. And I think just, again, always defining what it is for you. What does giving up mean for you? If you go down a negative rabbit hole, I think it's worth exploring to find out where this phrase come up for you, where it's a negative, or it has negative connotations to it. The positive aspects is where we typically don't look, which is
mm-hmm.
the grass or whatever, right? Where it's like, you know what, I'm watering my grass. I want my grass to be greener, so I'm not giving up. I'm watering my own grass.
Well, let's go. All this is really great in terms of what you're saying. Ray, what's coming out for you?
Well, I'm glad Sang started the conversation this way, because letting go, if you view it as a positive,
mm-hmm.
and the other as a negative, then you've got this conflict. But why is letting go a failure? If you understand what you're changing or why you're doing what you're doing, You've made a decision or whatever action you're about to take. So the letting go is if it has intent, value, and is part of what you've decided and what you feel is important, it's not a negative. Why is the old structure of letting go is failure needs to be changed or expanded to say not it's not always a failure.
Right. Well, it's funny because both of you have introduced again this idea of the individual's choice in terms of what, defining what that letting go means for you. Because what I think so many people are conditioned to when they hear that, well, you got to let that go. You got to let that go. Or, there's the extremes. There's the, Jesus take the wheel, right? I'm gonna let go and give it away, right? And there's all of these different ways in which that phrase is used to,
Yes.
if you will, come back and look at your own deep conditioning around something.
I also want to share that I focused on giving up and Ray focused on letting go. Two different phrases, two different meanings to people, right? And figuring out which one works for you and which one does have negative and does not.
Well, let's unpack that a bit, because what I kind of put the bias in the question, which is, if I let go, am I giving up, right? Because there's this tendency for people to think, oh, wait, I've invested all this time, I've been wanting to do this. Because what I saw in the gentleman that I was in this group meeting with is that tension, the letting go was essential because there was so much tension in holding on. And that is that sort of aspect of control that is so open-ended in this question, right? Because sometimes you do need some things to hold on to, right? You need it, but oftentimes there's a lot more space that opens up if you can just not. There's a difference between connected and hanging on to and hanging on for dear life. Does that make sense? And those all inform a different journey of letting go.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're just now joining us, we're in new digs this week, and our conversation is if I'm letting go, am I giving up? And if you're watching our broadcast right now on YouTube, we're glad to have you with us. And you can let us know in the chat if you can hear us correctly, if everything is going across. That would always be a great thing for us to receive from you. And in the weeks to come, we'll be inviting you back into this room with us to join in the conversation with us live. But let's go back to those aspects of control then. Even this morning, I have a little bit of the heebie-jeebies because there's new things that I have to control, right? I have to kind of let go of what's been going on.
Right.
So, have there been times saying when you're sensitive to that tension, that there's so much tension from hanging on to things? Has that ever been present in your life?
Yeah, and it's everything's always conditional, right? Some things have sentimental value. Some people have sentimental value. I think it's what we give meaning to and how we also view control, right? I know for myself, it's not necessarily what I know what I can control in terms of what I want to do, and I get to choose what I hold on to. I get to choose, and I go back to that choice. And I think that we oftentimes human beings forget that we have a choice. And one of the things that came up for me this week is we give meaning to words, right? We give meaning to words. We give meaning to situations based on our experiences, based on different things. And I think, as for myself, as I'm trying to decide, do I want to do this or do I want to do this? Or when do I let go? For me, I know it's a gradual process unless it's something very finite that I have to decide.
Right.
Has anything to do with my emotions? It's a gradual process typically, unless there's something that's major catastrophic that something has to change right away, and there has to be a bit of that. But for me, it's more of a gradual change. If my emotions are involved, it's a gradual change.
Well, then let's introduce two terms in the process of letting go that need some definition, or at least an opportunity to go under the microscope to find out. And those are the two things that you brought up: release versus surrender.
Mm-hmm.
Brady, do you have any
Mm-hmm.
thoughts about the difference between release and surrender?
Yeah, because I think as Sang was sharing what her thoughts and ideas, the interesting aspect is that letting go is not quitting automatically, and release. And what was the second word, Jamie? The release and
Surrender.
surrender. Yeah, surrender is it's an interesting polarized uh, extreme of the spectrum. Is surrender is I give up, I can't handle it, I'm out. I lay down my arms, if you're going by the military sense of it. Um, but yeah, it's I think it's by defining the words or our intent, because I'm sure if we ask that in the chat, what does surrender mean to you? What does a release mean to you? We're going to get a whole different set of definitions and ideas attached to that, which then help us. Oh, okay, so that's what you're thinking, and then we can either say, well, that's not the same as me, etc. So I think it's I didn't quite answer the question
You
by
did. You did. Because you introduced why we get so tripped up into the conditioned of what we need to be discussing about the word surrender. We have received some reports now from visitors in our chat on YouTube, and I just wanted to let them know that our conversation topic for today is, if I let go, am I giving up? And we are in our new facility here on Ripley, which we'll be inviting people into in the weeks to come. But it was, um, let's see. I'm reading a little comment in the chat because I have to kind of let go of not being able to see it. And one day soon, I guess, as someone, you were the one who put that in the chat there, saying, I want to go back to the militaristic definition of surrender, because that is often what people hear when they hear that word surrender.
Mm-hmm.
And as somebody who has dealt with a lot of faith communities, the concept of surrender in non-militaristic terms is really powerful. But so many, and I'm going to use a gender thing here. So many men are conditioned to think that surrender is the militaristic waving the white flag, I'm giving up. And so whenever they hear the phrase let go and just surrender, there's all of this conditioning that they have to move through to unpack, right? And it goes back to what you were talking about, saying, which is the definition of those words. I mean, I even saw you grimace when we were talking about surrender. What comes up for you?
Yeah. Well, you take those words to go back. It takes us back into a time where those words were used often. Like, I really don't hear a lot of those words anymore, like surrender. I don't hear it too much, depending on what kind of container I'm sitting in. However, when you hear certain words, and I talked about this, I think last week on a different show, is words have that type of power that hold on to us. I know for surrender, for me, is more of like, it's not really about giving up. It's more of, I'm letting be what is, and I'm moving this way, right? Because sometimes I may have done everything I needed to do, and everything I wanted to do. And it's not really a word that I've used in my vocabulary often, to be honest. Surrender. I surrender unless I'm playing or joking, I feel like, and it's like playing around, like the white flag type situation. Like, okay, I surrender, I surrender. But I don't typically, I feel like that's not really a word that I use in my vocabulary. But
yeah.
that's one that I understand.
But it's also a concept that a lot of people hold. Our good friend Jessica reminded us in the chat on YouTube that the wisdom of the great Kenny Rogers, right? Know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run. And that is, but interestingly, within that cliche is a really powerful lesson about surrender, right? Which is, and I think that that's the idea, that the release, right, that we're talking about, those two aspects of letting go, the release, the giving up of the tension, the holding on to. You can stay connected to something, but if that energy is all connected and clamping on and holding on to it and grabbing and worrying it, that's a completely different critter. And so that is true about surrender, which is, I loved what you began your comment with saying, I realize it's not a word you use very often, But if the concept of surrender is recognizing it's time for me to redirect, you know, there is more in my horizon that has emerged that I choose to want to deal with, right? And so I'm surrendering to the fact that, I am not a totalitarian being that can, wave my hand and say, well, the universe now needs to go according to the way I see things. But I'm
Right.
surrendering. I'm giving up that control of that destiny and I'm recalibrating to something else. Does that land for you, Ray?
Yeah, I wanted to see if I totally understood when you said surrender in a religious context, whether there's a clear definition of what that means. Because I'm just remembering way back when, where surrender in religious terms meant letting come.
Right.
I don't know if that's different than what you've heard or experienced.
I think that well, let me make sure I use my more ministerial voice in this moment. What I think the spiritual concept of surrender is recognizing that you are not the controlling power of the universe.
Right. Yeah.
And so often in conditioned thinking that, especially in this country and especially at this particular time, we all want to, believe that, well, if I could just wave a wand and change the universe. There are some people who get up every day and, try to live that as their way of being, right? And they exert that control. They force that to happen. There was another little wonderful comment, and I'm looking forward to you all joining us in this studio next week. Where we'll be able to incorporate your concepts as well. There is that idea. Somebody was actually saying, surrender Dorothy. You remember the very the very famous thing in The Wizard of Oz. But I just saw another comment in the chat, which I think is helpful, which is faith in and of itself is surrender. And that is the foundational difference between the modernity definition of surrender, which is giving up, right? And the more spiritual concept of surrender, which is recognizing you are not in control of the universe, and that you're holding on to something and willing it into existence, however dedicated that may be. When that hold gets so strong, the release and the surrender are essential. And, going back to, a key saying concept, understanding those definitions and making sure that you don't go into judgment. Because, what happens when people say, well, I let go of that idea. And, you're in the back of your mind, you're going to hear somebody say, oh, well, that's Jamie. He's just always got one idea after another, right? All of those tapes that keep running, all of those messages that are in your head about release and surrender. Are any of those familiar saying?
Oh yeah, I think being able to distinguish for yourself, right, the difference for what it is for you. Again, going back, like you said, going back and understanding what does that mean to you. Surrender clearly means something different to all three of us. And if we were to use it in whatever capacity, I think then it becomes looking at how to have a conversation to gather that universal understanding of what this entire group as a collective looks at the word surrender and views the word surrender or release or giving up or letting go, and how they correlate in their own individual lives based on their own experiences.
Yeah. So. Yep. Ray, is there anything else underneath that for you?
Yeah, I think that this is sort of a collateral idea in the sense that what you just described saying is that if we explain our understanding of surrender and agree that when you use the term, we understand what you mean, or we expand it to include a little bit of everybody's view, that becomes a very powerful thing, because there again, the value of the word, the power of the words to understand each other so that we don't go off on a tangent or, oh, well, what the hell is she talking about? It's, I understand. That's a huge benefit.
It is. Because I want to introduce kind of a Rise and Shine Sundays key concept about this. Because one of the things that we recognize is that holding on to things can be really addictive. It's this whole idea of this negative reinforcement that we put ourselves through. We'll hold on to something and we'll hold on to something because the messages are not only there in our heads that we can't give up, right? But it's not being able to recognize that time when the grip, when the connection is a grip, right? And then when that grip becomes a squeeze, and when that squeeze becomes so much tension, right? Um, that process, for a lot of people, becomes the way in which they carry responsibilities all the time. Like, the only way that I know I'm connected is because I have this really solid, and again, we've just been conditioned to believe that that whole holding on, like, you better hold on to this, hang on to this, do this, don't. It's kind of the process that's behind hoarding. There's a whole bunch of other things, that we can look at in certain contexts, but the magic is what becomes available to you when you let go. What else is present when you stop letting go of that grip? Yeah, saying go.
Well, I'm going to go back to something you said before, because I think we get to that point if we take a lot of things that we've talked about in the past, but there's a level of resentment that I think that happens that gets us to that point of we're either giving up or letting go. When you said it just continuously did and squeezes us and squeezes us, because all I could think of was things that I continuously hold on to that don't serve me, that allows my own behavior to shift, even though I know, right, that I want to let this go or let something go or whatever. There's that level. I think that what I felt while you were talking about squeezing, I was like, oh, that's resentment. Like there's something that the guilt or something that's coming up that's saying, I want to let this go, but what is this hold? What is this grasp that it has onto me? That, and it could be where it is fear of failure, fear of being seen, fear of being vulnerable, fear of just allowing yourself to have that moment. So I think, even in that aspect, that's what was coming up for me for that in terms of the squeeze. That's what I was thinking of when you were
Yeah,
saying that.
it's kind of becoming clear to me that we really don't have good definitions around the concepts of letting go.
Mm-hmm.
We have all sorts of things in the culture that reward us for hanging on, sticking to it. The tenacity, you're not a quitter. That's the one thing I know about Ray. He's not a quitter, and but we don't have a lot of good language around letting go because it gets really convoluted. We don't, we, because it is letting go, giving up, right? Is letting go, is it the release? Is it the surrender? Well, I have never really looked at release and surrender because no one teaches you how to let go, right? We reward you for hanging on, for your persistence. We reward you for moving forward, for blindly, got to put your blinders on, right? Uh, and so to me, we're going to go back to this idea of how does it feel in the body?
Mm-hmm.
If something you are holding on to is strangling you, that might be a really good message to say it's time to let go, right? And it can happen on the body level in terms of tension. I know one of the things that I've encountered in the past several weeks is old ideas that I've been holding on to. Because there's a really powerful question that I kind of want to, and I'm going to pose it for you guys as well. And I'm going to put it in the chat to see if anybody has any thoughts or comments that they wanted to respond to. Who would I be if I wasn't holding on to that thought? If you think of a thought that you've been trying to let go, who would you be if you let that go? And again, it doesn't need to have a specific answer, but it's just the idea of beginning to sort of switch, right? What would be available to me if I were to recalibrate instead of holding on? Those questions really awaken in us a sort of different level of understanding. Ray, I'm going to look to you just because those were some kind of powerful questions to land with. Yeah.
Yeah, there's an interesting element that sort of ties into this is that if we look at what are the dynamics around us as far as that either inhibit us or reinforce older behaviors, and part of it is the fear of the unknown,
Mm-hmm.
because it's better to cling to what you know, the devil that you know, than to try something new. Because what Sang brought out, okay, fear of ridicule, all those elements that she mentioned, is that oh, well, that's really scary. I shouldn't even think of, or that. And then you brought in the idea of, well, what is actually available to me if I do make that? So it's sort of bridging that. Fear of the unknown is literally reinforced in everything that we do. Is you better stick with that.
Mm-hmm.
You better don't go around, and then you look at it. It's in everything, in business, in politics, or you name whatever system we're referring to. It's all about well, we don't know about that, so you don't do it.
Well, and
Essentially, that's the answer. Don't do it.
don't do it. And the other thing that you raised and what you were talking about is that we can do surface level letting go and then just redo the same thing. One concept that I was dealing with, it affects those of us who are in business or in doing business. We can we can give up on an idea, right, and then go back and embrace another idea and bring the same patterns that got that idea. So sometimes it's not just the thought that you're letting go, but the layers of the framework that's underneath it. And so um, you really you really want to have a complete release, when you're talking about it, because and again, there may be situations, where a slight recalibration is all that's necessary to make that path forward uh, full of ease, joy, and glory. But oftentimes, again, going back to your own definition of letting go, how much do I need to let go of? What it is it again, because we tend to go into these binary, okay, oop, dog alarm.
Yay.
um, so discuss while the dog emerges from a squirrel.
Yeah, I wish if you. I don't remember the question that you had specifically, so I want to go back to that because I know for myself, I'm pretty sure anybody who listens to this will be thinking about something very specific that Jamie was mentioning in his question. And I apologize, I don't know the question.
The question again was, who would I be if I let go of that thought?
Right. So, so as you're going through that, I'm sure, I know for me, I was sitting here going, okay, I know the exact one that I'm thinking about, right? And I go, what would that be? What would I be? And the question is, I don't know, right? I don't know yet. I just know that whatever this is has a grasp on me, right? That I'm choosing yet not to let go for whatever reason. And I think getting to the root of self to go, do I force myself to make this, to let it go? Or do I just gradually let it go as I wish? Or do I wake up one morning? Like, there's no recipe for it. You just get to choose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and again, because there's no recipe, and we also don't leave we haven't had those discussions about what that means. People are, it's kind of DIY, right? You've got to kind of figure it out. There's a comment in the chat that I'm just going to have to read because I have to switch to this to say, isn't wisdom recognizing what is toxic in myself and letting it go to allow space for newness to come? Choosing it serves me well. Choosing if it serves me well. It's my choice. And, it's not only the action, but something that we talk a lot about here. It's the definition.
Mm-hmm.
Your definition of letting go may be vastly different than someone else's, but it's worth a little self-examination to find out what that is. Because again, what we invite you to be a part of these conversations is to look at the issues around your own definitions. Were those definitions that are truly mine, right? Or were they the definitions My only definition of letting go is know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run.
That's in my head all the rest of the day.
But and again, it's a key concept. But again, if we don't have a framework that works for ourselves, like I knew that if I stuck with this, and I found myself being so tense, it was time to let that go. And I had to fight the conditioning that led me to say, well, I'm a quitter if I let go. And it's part of that is doing that courageous walk to be able to live your own definition. Ray, that seems to strike something for you.
Well, the minute you said conditioning, it totally resonated with me because there again, it's it's what you've been exposed to or experienced over a period of time that's the little voice in your head saying, "Don't do that," or "Oh no, you're going to be viewed as Sang said, you're going to be viewed as a loser. You're going to be viewed as being really different, or that's stupid," as Sang has said in previous things, as being ridiculed. So I think the part of it is to understand what your conditioning is,
Mm-hmm.
or what you to dwell on it. Yeah, that's kind of what I've heard from family. That's kind of what I've had from business colleagues. So I think the conditioning element, so it does require that courage and that muscle, as you've said before, to develop into something that provides you with the ability, the capacity to make a change or to step forward into the unknown and literally the uncomfortable.
Right.
And there again, the system doesn't want you to be uncomfortable.
Well, I think it's time in our Rise and Shine Sundays to sort of invoke the pause, right? Because one of the things that we talk about a lot, is finding that ability to be able to pause and reflect, to really take that moment. And in this moment, we're kind of inviting you, if you're going to be looking at the idea of letting go of something, part of the pause is understanding what's precious, right? What why are you holding on to that in the first place, right? And again, there's a definition to being connected to your values, and then just acting out of deeply conditioned behavior to hold on to something. The young man who walks our dog, he worked for a high tech firm, and he's just one of the nicest kids in the world. He and his girlfriend live down the street from us, and the great thing about him is he came to me a couple of weeks ago and he said, well, I'm going to let you know I'm changing jobs, and he's been and he's decided to become a postman, right? Because he loves being out walking and doing things, is one of the reasons why he loves doing that. And he just said, he just turned 30, remember, just turning 30, right? And there were all these concepts in his head about letting go of being on the career treadmill, right? Well, you're working your way through this corporation, you're going up and up and up. And he did that inventory to know what was precious about that for him was that he liked being outside. He didn't like, having to be stuck in Zoom meetings all day long. It was just eating away at his soul. And, he would never have articulated it in the same way that I have, but you could just see how that pause that he did, right? And then you develop the courage to act on your values through your own definition of what that means, right? And when you're able to give yourself that pause to reassess what is precious, right? Wait, why am I doing this? This is my life. Another rock song is going to come up. It's my life, right? It's now or never. Nothing's going to last forever. But I think that all of that is the recognition that pause that we talk about so often in this space is really, really important for you to do that inventory and to do that redefinition. Saying, is that true for you?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things you said was courage, right? The courage to step out and make that decision. And in a society where we live, where everyone rewards blame and shame and ridicule, right? And it's such a courageous thing to step out and do something against the norm.
Mm-hmm.
I love that the neighbor down the street decided to do something fun, because I love hearing about stories like that, simply because when I work with a lot of career clients, they're trying to figure out what's next, right? Because they've only known this one thing, and they only know, and it's like, how do I let go of what I've known for the last 20 years? I've only known this job, or I've only known that I need to climb the career ladder.
Mm-hmm.
How is it possible that I could even step out and go do something like this? Because are people going to laugh at me? Are people going to make fun of me? Is my family going to say something? Like, there's all these conversation, and it's very courageous when people step out and do something like that for themselves, and to own the fact, I want to be outside. Yeah. I love walking outside. I love doing this. And now you get to do what you love and be outside and get paid. It's a great thing.
Yeah. Something you just said again, saying just, life is not linear. And oftentimes that is another one of the misconceptions behind letting go, right? Because the idea is that, those of us who have lived a long time will tell you it's multifaceted, right? And so if you still believe that, the only way forward is, this way, I've got to hang on to this because I can't recalibrate and do any of those things. Again, what opens up for you when you let go of that? Because there is a redirection that can happen when you have that courage to have taken the pause and move forward. He says, pausing. Ray, do you have the courage to say anything at this moment?
Oh, I just was just sort of mulling over everything that's been shared, and I had a flashback to the 80s when it's because of saying when she said the norm is I started my company in the 80s. And my immediate reaction from my family was, why don't you get a job?
Right.
And they go, says, well, it is a job, you actually do work and you actually get paid. He says, yeah, but there's so much uncertainty. I said, yeah, but I don't want to be trapped. I says, I first off, it was the time when the jobs weren't available to begin with. So they weren't looking at the whole. So I think it was, in some ways, I was jumping into the unknown because I knew I wanted to start something different. So I think that's the interesting aspect, is letting go of what the world around you expects. And it was far from being linear. Back to you, Jamie, that it was ups and downs and left turns and right turns.
Right. And as you know, that linear thought, the binary direction, you're either up or you're down, because what I almost was waiting for saying to use the term career ladder, right? Because there's all these people who go like, well, I had to step off the career ladder. And I'm just like, there's just one ladder, that we, and it only goes one direction, right? Or, it's amazing how much of that binary linear stuff is, well, this leads to that, and that leads to this, and that leads. Well, you know what? There's a whole jewel of connections that could be. I mean, and again, what else is possible when you let go of that concept? It doesn't mean that your choices that you're making, again, if it's precious for you to continue working in this direction, but at least it's not the struggle, the stress, and the strain, right?
I love that. I'm going to say, I love that you used the word career ladder, because that makes me think about like the visual aspect of what we learned back then, which was the career ladder did go up. It's not like it went up and then that branched off, right? You went up there and you were at the top there, and then you had to get another ladder or whatever, right? But when you think about it, if you're going up the career ladder, the only way to do somewhere is either to go all the way up or go all the way back down. Mm-hmm. And going all the way back down means starting over, right? Which means giving up, which means letting go of everything that you've done. And I think that's a lot of concept, because back in our day, you were the job, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. You were defined by what job you held. Mm-hmm. People judge you by what job you held. Oh, well, because I hear it even in today, it's, what's the next career step you want to take? And these people have no idea.
No place to go but up.
They don't know, or like, right?
See you at the top.
Or they're, and I ask them, like, what do you want to do? What excites you?
Mhm.
What is it about your jobs that you've loved, right? So it just becomes something different. But thinking about the latter concept is they have to go back down. And so from a visual perspective, people see that as going all the way back down, starting over,
Mhm.
and they don't want to start over
Right.
because I've worked here to get here. So why would I want to let that go? And that's where, even earlier, where you were talking about people will hold on to so many things for so long and be there, or be in relationships, or be in conversations, or be at companies, right? Or be in a ruminating thought all the time, where at some point, and then it goes, what if?
Right.
What if I do this? What happens when I do this?
And what you're talking about is that, again, getting into your head space and trying to figure it all out in your head again, right? Because,
Mhm.
we tend to do all of that. You're like, okay, I'm going to put my mind in control of this. I'm going to scan the field. But, your mind is only going to be able to draw on what it did in the past and reflect on what it did what it wants to see in the future. But when you kind of go back to the idea that your body kind of holds a level of truth, you'd be surprised if, and again, that's why I was so grateful that my dog walker decided, my body feels so much better when I'm out walking around and doing things, right? There's the wonderful cliche that people live through is, well, that's the rat race, right? Well, what if you're not a rat? And what if you just stop racing? What if you change the definition of allowing yourself the permission to do that? And I can see, maybe you saw me scanning around. I always keep a little permission slip on my desk, right? That I will hold up sometimes in meetings and say, okay, you have a permission slip to go do something different now. And I think that that's part of getting off that ladder, saying, that, we can see that it works. There's evidence, we got facts, and we built this and we put it together. But there are many points along there where you can recalibrate, change, draw from. And that's why when I was asking the question, who would you be? Right?
Mhm.
Who would you be if you didn't work for, XYZ Corporation and became a postal worker?
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, a possibility of new, things kind of come up that feel differently in your body, right? And when we ask questions about that sort of somatic level of experience, um, uh, and and feeling good is a good thing, right? When you feel that alignment, when you see that people are really aligned with doing something that they love. And a real easy experiment for people to do, something that I've been experimenting with in my own life. Ray knows this personally, as do other people. When things have been causing me a lot of stress lately, I'm going out and putting my hands in the dirt. I mean, there's a point at which you can get caught into all of this, negative reinforcement. Like, if things aren't working, staring at them longer isn't going to make them work any differently. So sometimes you need to really kind of rewire yourself, right? And sometimes it takes a shift away from, well, let me just think about it differently. No, let me change my state, right? Let me literally take my body out of doing something, and let go from this level, right? Rather than this level.
Mhm.
And I can hear my dog in the background in case there's still a little bit of a murmur there. Anyone in the chat, this is a time, and there's something that you have. We've been talking this week about. Let me see if I can make sure I do this pulling all the new levers. If I let go, am I giving up? And we've been talking a lot in our new space here, which we're going to be inviting you to next week. Those of you who are watching this now, you will be able to join us actually in the room here. And I'll maybe even give a little bit of a preview here on the screen. I'm going to let go of what I was thinking of doing. That you'll be able to occupy one of these seats right here in the room with us. Yeah, down here. You can come down here and sit with us in the room and move around with us and be part of the conversation. Oops. Here on, you'll be. Now we're going to be giving people the psychedelic experience, which I didn't necessarily want to promise them. But we'll be able to see your comments in the chat here in the room. We'll be able to, if you want to join us as a member of the audience, be with us here in our new little space that we'll be having for Rise and Shine Sundays. But you'll be able to get there by going to rsslive.org, rsslive.org. And in fact, if you wanted to experiment, you could actually try coming into rsslive.org if you wanna, and join us in this conversation. So back to
Can
this
I add
idea.
just one
Yeah,
quick
yeah.
quick thing? Another fun thing is you can join us and we can hear you. You don't have to turn your camera on. You could be a voice that shares with Sang and Jamie and I, and I think that's pretty exciting. So instead, if you hate typing, which I kind of hate typing and chat, I get tired of that. You could actually just say something, because in one of our calls recently, somebody said, "I'm just going to say it. I'm not going to type it." So over to you, Jamie.
Well, I'm just letting people know that like I said, there's an opportunity if you want to join us at rsslive.org today. If you get this, if you want to let go of where you've been, right, for the past 35 minutes watching the show and want to join us over here, we're here. But we'll be talking more about that next week because, like I said, we're part of the process for us has been letting go of a lot of, and I love the fact that you brought up the whole idea of career work, saying, because I know you do a lot of career work with people, and and career counseling is also getting people to decondition what they believe what their work is supposed to be. And again, oftentimes that letting go process and saying, but that's surrender to me. Surrender means not that you're giving up in that moment, but when you recognize that your definition is keeping you from something that is really connected to be true within yourself, that's surrender. That's the spiritual surrender. That's recognizing that I went down this path. I ran into a wall. I kept running into the wall. I kept running into the wall. And I decided, you know what?
I don't want to run into the wall anymore.
I don't want to run into the wall anymore. You can have your wall, and I'm going to I'm going to go somewhere else, right? And then you find, again, this is again a spiritual concept, the joy of surrender. Because I just have to go there because what the next part of that is then being grateful for having had that awareness, right? Because that's how that loop gets completed, right? And it requires you developing that courageous muscle, right? To be able to follow what you know is true for you in a culture that wants to say, well, no, this way, the ladder goes this way, your progress looks like this, right? I mean, has there ever been a time in your life when you followed somebody else's plan, which is helpful? Because sometimes when we don't know where we're going, somebody else's plan is helpful, right? I want to know, I want Hansel and Gretel to leave me breadcrumbs, right? But I think what we're recognizing so much in the idea of letting go, right, is for you to have that experience of understanding why letting go can be so powerful for you.
My entire life, I will say I'm at a very interesting place in my life where right now I would like someone to tell me what to do. Right? Because I was told, like when I was growing up, I was told what to do clearly, but like I was told what I was going to be. I was told where I was going to go to college. I was told where I was going to do this, but then no one taught me what to do when I got there. What all these obstacles that happen when I get there. So I was thrown into the unknown, right? So, which I feel like that makes me a little more cautious when I'm stepping into the unknown, which is why I know I hold on to things much longer than I should.
Right.
Because I was thrown into the unknown. I didn't know anything about the world. I didn't know how to do this and how to do that, like nothing. And now I'm like, dude, I don't want to make decisions.
Well,
like somebody look at my life and tell me what would be a trajectory for me, or what am I good at, like what, and so it's very fascinating even as you go through those different stages,
right,
your life, and how your definition of letting go shifts as you continue to evolve.
Well, and again, I think that that's part of what we're inviting people to do always in all of this is experiment. And, there's even this inhibition to experiment. Well, he's experimenting with drugs. It makes it seem like whenever you're experimenting, it means you're uncertain. Does that make sense? Like, warning, warning, don't experiment. Don't test it for yourself, right? Follow the Ray Gio School of Hard Knocks plan. If you follow my plan, now you can follow the Ray Gio plan. I mean, I'm just use you, Ray, as an example, right? But you use the Ray Gio plan to see what it evokes in you. What does it wake up for you? And if you say, well, you know what, Ray, I love steps 1, 2, and 3. Step 4, that's wacko for me. And I went this direction. That is putting that power of um, giving yourself the permission to experiment, redefining that it's okay for you to experiment. And so, this week, if there are things that you've been looking at that you've been saying, you know what, I need to let go of this, right? The one trap you don't want to go into is judging yourself for letting go or the time you spent or whatever, because it will keep you from seeing what's available to you when you let go. And it's okay when you don't know the direction that you're going in to experiment. And it's okay to look at what people are, the principles that people have laid out for you. As we proudly say in our disclaimer, we're not experts here to advise you in any way, shape, or form. We want to be able to provide you with information so that you can make the best decisions for yourself. And so that non-judgmental part of it, which is, hey, it's okay to experiment. See what it feels like to let go,
Well, I think most people have already done that. They just not have labeled it that way, right? So if people think about the last time you had to let go of something or a thought or whatever, what was it like for you then? What came up for you then? Right? Is that still coming up for you now? Is that still whatever that grasp is, whatever that hold is? Is that
Right.
still this thing that's coming up now? Because again, the evolution of what we experience, what we go through, shifts, and so as we're asking that, because there were times when I was super negative to myself, negative self talk all day long, and now I'm cute, I'm adorable when I make fun decisions,
Right.
right? And when I'm trying to navigate through something where I want to let go, again, it's what's holding me back? What is going on? What is this grasp? Like you were talking about, and then also, how does that affect my daily life? Because like we talked about, I think a few weeks ago, the impact,
Right.
right? Because with that comes a little shift, comes change. Now there's some impact. Is it going to affect this person? Is it going to affect that person? Is it going to affect my family? Like so many different questions come into play that also compound. And again, if there are other people involved, then the question becomes, if I give up, did I give up, and did I give up on the rest of my family?
Yeah.
Give up on everyone else. So there's, again, a lot of different layers that can come into play.
Right.
With
But,
this
the thing that keeps people out of overwhelm in those situations is do what you feel is best for you. It's that connected space. It's that pause, right? And what makes it especially difficult for everybody, and this is we're coming into the end of our time together, is we live in a culture right now that celebrates and wants you to stay in worry, clutch, and grab. That if you are, we need to make sure that you're worried, that you're hyper connected on some of and you've got to grab whatever you can get, right? And you're going to clutch at it, right? You're not going to bring a conscious pause to things. And so even just the courage to ask yourself questions within the safety of that, I use this in a Facebook post that I posted a couple of weeks ago, recognizing that most people are in these wonderful survival spheres, right? These places in which they know there's a lot that we're contending with in the culture these days. But if you can honor that, that pause, that safety sphere that's there with you, right? It's again what opens up to you, what becomes available when you let go, even just a little.
Again, I will say I love watching my children in this aspect, right? To watch them evolve and the things that they like, things that they liked when they were kids, or like as you know, they because I allowed my kids to. And I know we're getting to the end, so I'm going to be very mindful of the time. But looking at watching another human being, see them like go through things, and then helping them make those decisions for themselves, not necessarily pushing my agenda onto them because of my experience, but just allowing. And I think that's the part that we forget when we are out here having those conversations. When other people are doing things for themselves, we automatically want to judge based off of what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like you're talking about, like some people might go, "What? Why would you give up that job and go be a post worker? Why would you do that?" Like there's so much around that, and I think if we lead with compassion and understanding, and saying, "Wow, that's a really great choice. What led you to that?"
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like again, going back to what we talked about before, be curious.
Correct.
Be curious for people.
And something you just demonstrated, saying, is the way in which you treat other people is very indicative of the way you treat yourself. Some of the most judgmental people, and this took me a long time to realize, some of the people who were closest to me, because I was being in a very judgmental space with myself, were very judgy people, right? And so one of the things that we'll invite you to, maybe we'll talk about this next week, is the importance of a cloud of witnesses. That, the ability to be with somebody who can ask you the question that Sang just asked when you're challenged, versus, well, why the hell did you become a postman, right? But the culture wants us to stay stuck in that, right? So one of the things Ray talks about, in order to sort of have better conversations, we also need to somehow create better humans, right? And so you can be the better human by learning how to have these conversations with yourself, and then also have them with other people that are close to you in your world. Ray, anything else that you'd like to add for the balance of the hour?
I'm just going to add a little bit to what Sang is always referring us back to, which is incredibly beneficial as far as what do you mean by these words? These words have meaning, but we need to share what that meaning is part of the things that I find interesting is watch what language you use and what metaphors, like the career ladder. Well, that's a control metaphor. Mm-hmm. So as you're exploring the new stuff, like Sang is saying, is like, change your language, and you notice people will change their language when a shift is happening, or when they're looking at something else. It becomes less restrictive language, right. And the control metaphors are shedded to for probably more organic ones.
Yeah, and letting go of your definitions is a really good way to begin, and seeing what other definitions are out there for us. Again, I want to invite you that the idea that next week you'll be able to join us in this room, in this conversation here in Rise and Shine Sundays, in our very Zen room, or what we call the Rise and Shine Sundays gathering space. And you'll be able to get there at rsslive.org if you'd like to join in. But we are always so grateful that to be able to have our beacon going out in the Breakthrough Show Network, and all of the things that the Breakthrough Show Network does to support the work that we do. That's that reciprocal value exchange. That's something that we're not letting go of, something that we're going to continue to embrace. Until next week, we invite you to kind of, check your definitions, let go, learn that self-verification process, and be back with us next week when we wake up to what's emerging on Rise and Shine Sundays. Thank you all for being here. Now I've got to test to see if I can do these buttons correctly. All right. So we'll make this happen, and we'll see you all next week.